This time, Billy Bingham's Northern Ireland lights up the gloom.
And it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more. 'Cause I'll stay a wild rover forever and more. And it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more. 'Cause I'll stay a wild rover forever and more.
Hello and welcome to By Far the Greatest Team, a podcast in which football fans attempt the seemingly impossible to rank once and for all who is the greatest team of all time. My name's Graham Dunn, putting the case for Oxford United at every opportunity, and the man, the king of the numbers, over in our data studio over there is Jamie Rooney.
Hi, Graham. I think if people listening to these lovely podcasts that we put together, if they didn't know the generation we grew up in, I think they would have a really good chance of guessing. And this is our third football team from the 1982 World Cup that we now are talking about. We're giving loads away about ourselves just by talking through the 1980 World Cup every other episode, it seems.
Well, I mean, it does feel like it was only 3 or 4 episodes ago we were talking about the 1982 World Cup, because it was. But at the time, we made clear the Northern Ireland story is far, far more interesting. And it is a truly impressive story. It's a story which has outsized importance, both culturally and for the footballers involved. And for many of those footballers, after the heroics of 1982, lots of those Irish players got their dream moves. I mean, Mal Donaghy joined Man United, and of course, Jerry Armstrong impressed everyone so much that he got a move to real Mallorca, and of course, Billy Hamilton got his dream move to Oxford. And obviously, I'm deeply excited to talk about Billy Hamilton. I'll be probably dedicating an entire podcast to him when we do the Oxford United 86 team. Jamie, I know we've discussed whether it should be 7 or 8 episodes long, so still kind of working the format out for that one.
I think I said minutes.
But Billy Hamilton, and I was so excited to discover that, because I'd completely forgotten about this. About 85-86, Billy Hamilton developed a board game, Billy Hamilton's Football Academy. Firstly, I was deeply excited about football board games or football games, football manager games. I really wanted to have a game like that, and then to discover seeing it in a small ad in the back of Shoot. I remember kind of just looking at it. There was Billy Hamilton's Football Academy, not only a board game, but a game named after an Oxford striker. This is just unreal. So I put a shout out on X this morning to see if anybody had actually played the game, and I'm so excited. So Ben has contacted me. He did have that board game, so people were playing it, and it was just a fantastic thing. I mean, if the 1982 World Cup hasn't shown our demographic, I think talking about a 1980s footballer putting his name to a board game, that probably is, this isn't one for the kids, but absolutely outstanding. Had you ever come across that game?
Well, I just think it's interesting picking up on your last comment. A board game endorsed by Billy Hamilton. This isn't one for the kids. Probably another celebrity endorsed board game that wasn't one for the kids was Jimmy Savile's Pop 20. But that's probably a different story. But yeah, celebrity endorsed board games. I mean, we've just picked up on a brand new subgenre. This is fantastic.
I'm right across this, or I want to be right across. Again, on X, I got pointed to an article where he actually in a Q&A he does with the Belfast Telegraph. Billy Hamilton gets asked about the board game, and this does make sense. I'll read his quote. When I was injured and had a plaster cast on for 4 months, I was sitting at home going stir crazy, and I came up with the idea to invent a board game. I can testify that Billy Hamilton was injured for quite a lot of his Oxford career, unfortunately. Well, absolute hero, but he was in the latter years, he was sadly a bit injured. But this is the bit I like about it. Other footballers put their name to games, but this was my game from conception to getting it on the market. And he did, and he actually, the whole concept is his from start to finish. He worked on it for about 6 months. I don't think commercially it was a massive success. But I was thinking that other footballers put their name to games, but this was my game from. So, but I was trying to think of any other footballers.
I think Alan Ball had something going on after he finished football. I can't remember what it was, some kind of soccer game. And then you've got
Fantastic.
the Ginnies, electronic football, where you've got the football stadium and the lights, and you move your kind of stationary players that can only go like horizontal, kind of up and down the football pitch. So I don't know if that was Jimmy Hill and he kind of only half endorsed it and called it Ginnies. But yeah, I can't think of any other footballers, and I certainly can't think of any other footballers that have created and conceived a ball game and seen it through to fruition.
So if anyone has played Billy Hamilton's Football Academy or knows of any other footballer endorsed board games, we'd absolutely love to hear from you. You can catch us on social, so it's at Said and Done or at Couch Pundito. But that's enough nonsense. We should probably get into Northern Ireland 1982. So I'm sort of deeply excited about this one, not only because of the Billy Hamilton connection, although clearly that is quite important to me. But I love this story, and I think it's a really interesting one. There is definitely something about 1982 for us, has a kind of outsized impact for us. And I think that there are sort of kind of two big themes, I think, attached to this. And part of this goes actually to that era we were when we were watching. So 82 and 86, those World Cups are sort of foundation World Cups, aren't they? And of course, 82 and 86, Northern Ireland qualified for both of those. So that, as we were growing up, was kind of, well, it's just Northern Ireland in the World Cup again. But Northern Ireland getting to the World Cup is extraordinary, isn't it?
It's exceptional. They've only achieved it 3 times in their history, and we'll talk about the first time they did that in 1958 in a wee while. I just want to pick up on 82, 86. You're absolutely right. I mean, this, for me, is an era, and I know it's part of our childhood, and people of a certain age do reflect back and say that horrible saying, it was better back in our day. But I generally believe the World Cup was better back in the 80s and the early 90s, where you had the element of surprise in a World Cup. Now, we've lost that in the World Cups of the modern era because football has a global audience. It's 24/7. We can watch football from anywhere in the world. We know pretty much all the players. A lot of the players have played in major European leagues. Back in 82, 86, it was a shock to find out that little Honduras are actually quite decent. It was a surprise to see the wonderful Brazilians of 82, because you've heard about them, but you never realized how great they were. And then you learn about these wonderful players like Zico and Eder and Socrates. But you had to wait for a World Cup to get to that point because football just wasn't televised the way it is now. So they do hold precious memories because it was during a football period where the World Cup was a wonderful surprise event as well as a wonderful global event.
Absolutely. And in fact, Honduras in 1982 weren't just a surprise to you and me, Jamie. They were a surprise to Northern Ireland, Yugoslavia and Spain because people hadn't watched them. They didn't know anything about them. So, I mean, I think there are these two backdrops which go on to why this story is so significant. One, of course, is the Troubles, and we'll talk about the impact of that and how it's very directly affected Northern Ireland and during this whole period. And also, I think it goes some way as to why doing so well in the tournament meant so much to them. But also because Northern Ireland is so small, getting to the World Cup is not a regular thing. So I think when they qualify in 58, they are the smallest nation that's ever got to the World Cup. In fact, I think they retain that until Trinidad and Tobago, I think, get to the World Cup. They are also the smallest nation to have qualified for more than one World Cup. They're the smallest nation to have won World Cup games for. So getting to the World Cup was quite some achievement.
It's a massive achievement, and there's absolutely no doubt that the Northern Ireland are the smallest country to have qualified for multiple World Cups. I would imagine in Paraguay there's a little bit of debate of whether Northern Ireland were the smallest when they qualified in 1958, because Paraguay will say when they qualified for the World Cup in Uruguay in 1930, they were a population of less than 1 million. I don't know if that's ever been substantiated. So Northern Ireland definitely have a claim to be the smallest nation to qualify for multiple World Cups and definitely get to the second phases. Scotland, in comparison, which is a nation around 5 million, has never qualified for the second phase of a World Cup tournament, having qualified for more than Northern Ireland. But 58, I mean, it wasn't without its luck. I mean, how they qualify is brilliant. They're in a group. This is going back to the day where qualification was 3 teams, and Northern Ireland are pitched with Italy, who have qualified for every single World Cup they've entered since 1934, and they're with Portugal. And at this particular point in 1958, Portugal is still a developing football nation, but Italy are by far and away expected to qualify from this particular group. And it's not without its events, because going into the final fixture, Italy just need to secure a draw in the December 1957 game. However, in a similar way that we talked about Wales in 1958, fate just seems to be smiling on the British Isles. And the game was scheduled for December, but there was heavy fog in London. Now, the reason that was responsible for stopping the fixture, because the referee at the time is Van Sloot, who was also the manager of the Budapest Opera House. So he's got a nice little daytime job. He was stuck in London, so he couldn't get to the fixture on time. FIFA had decided to call the game off. It had been agreed they'd call the game off. But the Northern Irish FA absolutely didn't like that idea, because they've got these people that are expecting a game of football and they've paid their money and they want to showcase a game. So it's agreed in the very last minute that they play the game, but as a friendly. And the game has a lot of animosity. The Italians play a very rough game. It really kicks off. The score finishes 2-2, which under the circumstances of World Cup qualifier would have taken Italy through and Northern Ireland would have gone out. But because it's now been deemed as a friendly, that's not the case.
So what happens then?
So what happens then? They fulfill the fixture, and there's some brilliant Parfait News footage of this. And there's just some wonderful quotes from the guy who's in the Parfait News. And as they kick off in that plum English accent that British Parfait News had, the quote is, "A chance to redeem the not so friendly last month," which is just brilliant. Northern Ireland take a 2-0 lead. They hold on. Italy lose a player, and Northern Ireland win the game 2-1, and they therefore qualify for the finals in Sweden.
Do all 4 home nations qualify for this one?
They certainly do. Yeah. England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales. The home nations have only been competing for qualification for the World Cup since 1950, because there was always an idea that the English in particular, more so than Scotland, Ireland and Wales, were too dominant and too good to compete with foreigners abroad playing in this Mickey Mouse tournament, because, of course, at home we had the British Home International Championships, and that was regarded as the premium championship at the time. But yeah, this is the first time all 4 home nations, and the only time all 4 home nations are qualified for World Cup finals.
This is an extraordinary World Cup appearance, actually, for Northern Ireland. So they do qualify out of that group, and they do so in pretty extraordinary circumstances. At the end of qualifying, it is all level, and FIFA, as we've enjoyed before and will enjoy in the 82 World Cup, have entertaining ways of deciding it. And in this case, it was a direct playoff, isn't it? So they play off against Czechoslovakia, I think.
So you've got 16 teams competing, and Graham, they've actually decided in the 4 groups of 4, every team will play each other once, therefore playing 3 games. And the top 2 teams will qualify as a right for a quarter final. And
pretty normal.
However, it becomes a bit unnormal. They've introduced this thing called goal ratio, which is goal difference or goal average, whatever you want to call it. And they're only using goal difference for the teams that finish first and second to decide who finishes first and who finishes second. However, in the event that the points are shared for the teams finishing in second and third, they're no longer using goal difference or goal ratio as it was then. So Northern Ireland have an inferior goal difference to Czechoslovakia, quite considerable. I think it's 5-goal swing. But Northern Ireland have won the group game. They've beaten Czechoslovakia. So the head-to-head, they've won. So, yeah, FIFA have almost nailed the format, but they've decided that in the event of a tie between teams 2 and 3, there would be a playoff. So Northern Ireland and the Czechoslovakia team play off 2 days later after their final group games.
And it's a memorable game. Harry Gregg, the Man United keeper and Northern Ireland keeper, he can't play that game. There's the reserve keeper, Norman Upritchard, and so he plays in this game, and it's a sort of a memorable performance from him because he injures not only his ankle, he also breaks his hand. So you basically have a one-armed goalkeeper playing in this game. Impressively enough, they kept Czechoslovakia at bay and beat them in extra time and secure a place in the quarterfinals, where they were to lose to France.
It's probably worth pointing out a footballer that probably not many people have heard of outside Northern Ireland called Peter McParland. He played for a long time for Aston Villa, and he's considered both an Aston Villa and Northern Ireland legend. And Peter Parland scored 5 goals in the 1958 World Cup. He was level with Vavá from Brazil and only beat by Pelé and Helmut Rahn, who scored 6 goals each, and also the Just Fontaine, who scored the incredible 13 goals in that particular World Cup edition, which is the record today.
Another team member of that squad was one Billy Bingham, and obviously Billy Bingham is the man who comes to play a huge part in our story going forward. So 58 is this sporting high point for Northern Ireland, and it is, people look back to it, and those in-between years are pretty difficult. Northern Ireland have struggled to achieve anything drastically. I mean, some sort of major things happen, and I find it absolutely fascinating. One of the home internationals against Wales, they give debuts to 2 players, Pat Jennings and George Best. Debuts in the same game, and these guys go on.
Never heard of them. Who are they?
Probably the two greatest Northern Irish footballers. I mean, it's always difficult to pitch everything against it. George Best obviously has to be in some form. I think Pat Jennings is very difficult to argue against what he achieves in the game. We'll touch upon this as we talk about this story, but George Best, he wins 37 caps, and Pat Jennings wins 119. Lost those in 1986. So you couldn't have more differing legacies, I guess.
Yeah, that's quite contrasting. But I would also point out that their careers were quite contrasting as well. Not only did they play in very different positions, I think the way that they conducted themselves in the public eye in particular was pretty contrasting. So it doesn't surprise me. Goalkeeper Pat Jennings with gigantic hands has gone on to have a glorious international career, while George Best, who liked the glamour side of things, didn't play 37 games. It's crazy though. A player like George Best playing 37 games.
I mean, obviously he had his challenge, but I think it also points to the sort of the lack of game time, actually. I mean, there weren't that many, you're not having the tournaments, not playing quite the same number of matches. But if George Best could find trouble in at any opportunity, you have Pat Jennings, who's able to complete a move from Spurs to Arsenal and still be welcomed back to Spurs at the end and still be thought of fantastically well at both sides. I mean, that is in itself, if you want anything that shows the credit, is a credit to the man. So during that period in the 67-71, Billy Bingham has a spell as manager of Northern Ireland. They don't qualify for any World Cups. It's sort of okay, but this is a sort of difficult period. They have a spell with Terry Neal, later the Arsenal manager. It's worth saying that this job is a part-time job. So Terry Neal is actually, he takes it as player manager. So he's player manager, but he's playing somewhere else and they're managing the national team in between. They have various others. Danny Blanchflower comes back to do it. And it might seem that I'm slightly better informed than I normally am on these podcasts. I should flag a very good book if you are interested in this. I've got quite a lot of detail by Evan Marshall called Fields of Wonder, which tells this story in great Technicolor. So it's a good read. And in that, there's quite a lot about Danny Blanchflower, who seemed to be the Kevin Keegan of football coaching. He just basically played attackers, and everyone liked playing for him, but they didn't do that well. And of course, the other thing that happens, so we flagged earlier, that, this entire story is set against the Troubles. The early 70s, the first half of the 70s is a really difficult time for Northern Ireland and for Belfast. And one of the consequences of this, between 1971 and 75, Northern Ireland play their home games outside Northern Ireland. So they're basically playing all their games away from home. Now, clearly, that's a massive impact, and you can see what an impressive home record Northern Ireland have. But, I mean, to play 18 games away, that's difficult.
Yeah, it is. We've seen it, actually, in more recent times. Syria, who qualified for the World Cup playoffs in 2018, because of the similar in terms of what's going on, Troubles, obviously completely different culturally, but because of the circumstances are very similar to what was going on in Northern Ireland in the 70s and the 80s. Syria had to play away games. You can go back just a few years before that in Iraq, when the US-led and UK-led invasion into Iraq for weapons of mass destruction turned out not to be the case. Iraq went into civil war, into chaos, and it was unsafe for football matches to be held in Iraq. Iraq played all of their qualifiers for the Asian Football championships outside Iraq in various countries in the Middle East, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Jordan, etc. And they went on amazingly to win the tournament. So it can have adverse effects in terms of playing not in front of your home crowd. There are a couple of lighter stories. Taiwan, for example, in the 19 World Cup qualifiers, were paired against New Zealand. So they decided to travel down to New Zealand to play the home game, and then just decided, should we play the away game down here as well? And they did. So, 8,000 miles away from Taiwan, they decided just to kind of be efficient and get both games out of the way.
Just incredible. So really, the World Cup story kicks off again when Billy Bingham turns for his second spell as manager of Northern Ireland. Now, this is 1980. Bingham had a spell as manager of Everton. He takes charge of the Greek national team, a couple of club sides in Greece, in Mansfield. But the management career, he's not set anything on fire really during that period. And he comes back 1980 again, takes the job part time. But probably the difference this time around is that he's not doing anything else. So rather than having someone managing the national team off the side of a desk, this is all he's doing. So he is essentially managing full time, even if it's only a part time position. So the first game of their qualification is against Israel. It's over in Israel. In Evan Marshall's book, he actually uses a forward by Martin O'Neill, who's the captain of this Northern Ireland team, who talks about the first 20 minutes. They were sort of essentially getting battered, but was still 0-0, and there's a floodlight failure. And they all have to go off the pitch for a bit. And by the time they come back on, they're able to hold out for a 0-0 draw at Israel. And, it's an okay sort of start to the campaign. And that Martin O'Neill starts, this is what, a kind of major turning point in many ways. We will talk about the home internationals. This is one of our favourite topics. And so the home internationals, and this is, I think in many ways, you can really tell how Northern Ireland's fortunes are going, both on the football side and also, I guess, in terms of the troubles by the home international. So 1980. So Billy Bingham, this is sort of his first real chance to work with the players. But, Northern Ireland at this period, they do actually have some quite established top tier names. So in fact, they have Pat Jennings, they have Pat Rice, they have Sammy Nelson. It turns out for the 1980 home internationals, they don't have any of those three because Arsenal are playing the FA Cup with West Ham, which overruns there, and so they don't have them. They don't have Martin O'Neill either. This, I think, was connected to Nottingham Forest's successful European runs, although it was noted that Larry Lloyd was freed to play for England at this time. But there you go, that's another thing. So Northern Ireland enter the home internationals 19. They are a 33-1 shot to win this tournament. And it's fair to say that Northern Ireland haven't really starred in the home internationals over the years.
No, I mean, the home internationals has been contested since 1884, I think, and up until 1984, when the tournament ceased to be, it was the longest running international football tournament. But it's generally been won by England and Scotland, most notably England. England won over 50 titles. Ireland, or Northern Ireland, because they did compete as both, I'd won it up until this particular version. I'd won it, I think, 6 times.
And what's really interesting, I think you can actually see the foundations of what's to become the 1982 squad that he has in that team. So he uses that tournament. You see Mel Donaghy, John O'Neill, John McClelland, three players who have become sort of key parts of the Northern Ireland defence over the coming years. Billy Hamilton comes in for the first time, already thinking about that board game. And, against all odds, without the likes of Martin O'Neill and so forth, Northern Ireland, they beat Scotland 1-0. They get a very creditable draw with England for 1-1, Terry Cochrane, and they beat Wales 1-0. So pretty much from nowhere and off the back of a standing start, Northern Ireland under Billy Bingham have won the home internationals.
I like to think with Billy Bingham, because you referenced it already, he's come in and it's almost his final job. I think once he finishes Ireland, he has a spell in the Middle East, again, trend setting. Who knew that he was going to be trend setting for the next 30 years? But he had that early spell and it didn't work out when he was Northern Ireland manager. And it was a time when you've already mentioned it was a part-time role. It's a semi-professional role almost. But then he's got this kind of traditional approach. He goes off and he manages a few teams across various divisions, across various countries. So almost like a Roy Hodgson-esque way. He's developing himself as a coach, developing himself as a manager, to the point of when he's got the pinnacle, he gets given the international job. Now, growing up, that's how it used to be. International managers were generally awarded the honour of managing their country at the end of their career, based on the idea that they had the experience and the know-how, and they had the time in order to like progress teams into major football tournaments. So Billy Bingham's had this traditional route through to international management, and I think it plays a part. I think clearly he's developed skills along the way that allows him to be a better international football coach.
And one of the things he's very quickly picked up is that defence is the strength of this side and this squad. Northern Ireland aren't blessed with strikers. I mean, there is a very obvious high-profile forward, and we'll talk about him in a minute, but they're not blessed with forward players. And Jerry Armstrong, who becomes probably the most iconic player in all of this. Jerry Armstrong, when he's first playing, he's at Tottenham, and this is in the period where you had Crooks and Archibald up front, and so Jerry Armstrong was regularly the sub. He was regularly the sub because he could almost play anywhere. And this was in the days when you only had one sub. So Jerry Armstrong would actually end up playing as often as centre-back or full-back or on the wing as up front. And this is your lead striker. And it's apparent all across the Northern Ireland squad as a whole. But actually, when you look through the strikers that they take to the World Cup in 82, Billy Hamilton, and he's playing in the third tier with Burnley, they actually take Bobby Campbell, who was top scorer with Bradford, and he's playing in the fourth tier. I think he gets promoted. I think he might be top scorer in the league there. There's no great richness of forwards to choose from. But what Billy Bingham, I think, does so well is identifies where the strength is, and makes stuff hard to beat. And you see, that formula for how they're going to go on and get out of the group in Spain with those results. It's a 1-0. A 1-1, a 1-0. It is make yourself difficult to beat. Yeah. Don't concede goals. And he has them really well organised, and the spirit, and we'll talk about it when we get to the famous Spain game, but the bodies on the line, putting the block, just unreal. After the glorious home internationals win, Northern Ireland, they ride the back of this. They have a decent start in the qualifications. They get a result against, they beat Sweden. They share points with Portugal, one win and a defeat. They get a draw against Scotland. And as you say, that's a very creditable result around that time.
I think it's worth going back to one of those Portugal games, because I think there's a pretty significant moment in that game. So when they play Portugal at Windsor Park, having lost to Portugal in the third game, clearly they have to win. And it's a fantastic occasion. When you watch it back on YouTube, which I have done recently, the noise, the crowd are so behind the team. Windsor Park is rocking. It's fantastic. You've got these open-end terraces. It looks fantastic. It looks of its time. The noise is incredible. The pace of the game seems high as well. It probably isn't compared to the pace of the game these days, but it just seems that way. But there's a moment leading up to the goal. The goal comes from Jerry Armstrong, the striker turned centre-back, turned left-back, turned goalkeeper when Pat Jennings has got broken hand. He scores the goal. But there's a moment in the 74th minute where Northern Ireland have a free kick. They flick the free kick in, and the Portuguese defender just flicks it on with his head to knock it out for what is absolutely 99.9% a corner. However, Terry Cochrane has decided he's going to chase that ball down. And when you look at the speed of the ball, where it's travelling to, and you look where Terry Cochrane is coming from, you look at it firsthand, you think, you're an idiot, mate. You're not going to get it. But he chases it down. He was a speedy winger, and he chases it down incredibly well. He catches the ball just on the line. He spins. He composes himself. Then with his left foot, he swings in this beautiful curling cross where Armstrong rises and heads it. I just think that's a pivotal moment, because the ball could have gone out for a corner, which allowed Portugal to be organised. And if you look at the YouTube footage, the Portuguese players are already resigned themselves. That's a corner. Their shoulders are down. They're relaxed. They're walking. It's only the moment when they realise, this tiny little fella wearing number 7 has kept the ball in. They're trying to hustle themselves back into position. By that point, Armstrong's read the room. He knows what's going on. He's got himself in prime position just on the edge of the 6-yard box bag.
Very definitely, and actually Cochrane himself talks about it at that moment absolutely being pivotal. And actually, it's probably one of the sad things. Cochrane himself gets injured before the World Cup itself and doesn't actually make it, which is very very sad. And potentially causes a requirement for a rethink of tactics, which we'll sort of come on to. So we get to the summer of 1981, where you come around to the home internationals again, but as we said, this, everything here is being set against the context of the Troubles, and 1980 we have the hunger strikes, a fresh wave of violence and political challenges around that point. And for the home internationals, after much toing fro, England don't come to Belfast, and Wales don't come to Belfast, and it's an aborted tournament. Northern Ireland, they do play Scotland in Scotland, but as a result, and you can sort of see now, there's no question that the challenges around what was going on in Belfast at the time was security concerns have to come first, I guess. But I think also you're already tapping into this challenge around the home internationals and the future of them, and by this stage, what the interest level of England in particular to continue them. It's sort of the money is a lifeblood to the FAs of Northern Ireland and Wales, and maybe Scotland to some extent or another, but certainly Northern Ireland. And, the loss of those games has a major impact on Northern Ireland. And you can see if the home internationals weren't already heading for the exit, I think that was probably the last straw. But there is another impact, and the impact, of course, is these games are, they were scheduled to be played. We don't see this quite so often now, but World Cup qualifiers being played, so they'd either be played in kind of late on in the season, after the conventional season was over, or actually quite often in the first couple of weeks of the season. And those were always quite, for teams related to the English League, that was always a dangerous period because you didn't have those games. Now, of course, Northern Ireland have to play Sweden, and they're due to play them in June. They've obviously had two less games to play, which would have been Billy Bingham would have used as essentially friendlies for that game. Sweden, their season is still going on. They're undercooked when they go to Sweden. Sweden have been really disappointing in the tournament, in the qualifying at that stage, and Sweden win that game. And that is sort of seen as that might be Northern Ireland done, not least because Portugal are improving. Now, as it turns out, Portugal have to go to Sweden a little bit later under the same circumstances, and Sweden beat Portugal as well. And in fact, Portugal sort of implode. Northern Ireland get a really valuable point against Jock-Stein Scotland, and there are two teams that qualify from this group, and Scotland are going to qualify top of the group. The implosion of Portugal means actually we get to the fate where Northern Ireland only need to get a result against Israel, where they had began their campaign, and Jerry Armstrong once again gets the goal, seals qualification, and Billy Bingham's Northern Ireland are heading to the World Cup finals.
They could have done that with a draw as well. The game against Israel is crucial, but because of, you've mentioned Portugal's implosion, and it really is. We shouldn't forget that this is the Portugal team that goes to the Euro final just 2 years later and lose to host France. So this is a very good Portugal team. But yeah, the game against Israel is secure again. 1-0 to the Northern Ireland. We're probably going to talk about World Cup songs and World Cup anthems, but 1-0 to the Northern Ireland just sounds like a classic song for me, because Billy Bingham's method of football is absolutely perfect to keep it tight at the back and get the big man to knock one in up front.
Very much so.
If you want, Graham, we could talk about Northern Ireland's role in the. They don't have a role in the World Cup draw, but clearly they were in those incredible Terry Gillingham boxes and cages that were breaking down every 5 minutes, with Sepp Blatter blaming the young schoolboys for messing up his big FIFA draw. But they do eventually draw.
They draw Yugoslavia, Honduras, and Spain, the home nation. And as you referred to, we won't talk about it now, otherwise we'll be going on forever. But if you haven't heard our 1982 World Cup England podcast from 3 or 4 weeks ago, I would commend you to give that a listen to. One of the most disastrous World Cup draws, or any kind of draw of any kind. It is absolutely hilarious. So we have got Northern Ireland to the World Cup. We'll, after the break, look at how Northern Ireland do in the World Cup. So welcome back. And before the break, you heard Jamie teasing about World Cup songs. And on that 1982 England World Cup pod that we did, we dedicated, unsurprisingly, quite a lot of time to, was it pretty awful, We'll Fly the Flag England song, and my personal favourite, which is the John Gordon Sinclair led I Have a Dream, the Scotland song. Both of those charted. Northern Ireland had their song too. I don't think it did quite so well in the charts, but who did Northern Ireland turn to?
Well, they turned to an absolute Eurovision legend and Irish legend, Dana, not to be confused with the Dana International Eurovision legend who represented Israel. Dana, she went to Eurovision in 1969 and competed for the island of Ireland, which was a bit controversial at the time because she's from Derry in Northern Ireland, which is considered to be the United Kingdom, obviously, and she was competed for the island of Ireland. And then she came second, which is commendable. And then in 1970, she won Eurovision. So 12 years later, you're looking for somebody to do your first World Cup song ever. Who are you going to turn to? Seasoned Eurovision professional Dana.
When your man gets the ball, Northern Ireland has it all. It's good.
It's too catchy because it's awful, but it is catchy. And I listened to it a few days ago and I haven't had to re-listen to it because it just plays along in my head. You're right. When your man gets the ball, Northern Ireland has it all. We're off to Spain. Never mind the rain. When your man gets the ball.
The irony, of course, being never mind the rain, which is they obviously said because of the rhyme and the rain in Spain. But that World Cup is famously unbelievably hot. They would all have welcomed some rain.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't know if they were thinking of what's her name from was it Luton Airport fame at that particular point?
Lorraine Chase. Lorraine Chase,
yeah. She would have been popular around at this particular point, and she would have been singing about the rain in Spain in a kind of London accent.
If this couldn't be any more 1980, we managed to make a Lorraine Chase reference. This is good.
Well, I mean, we started off with board games. I mean, there's nothing more 1980s than board games, is there?
So the World Cup comes up and the World Cup fever has hit. Now, almost immediately, and you know this is coming, we've talked about, and we've seen this in lots of other World Cups that we have had, where we have had talismanic, injured, half-fit players coming to the squad who people pin their hopes on. Now, he's not played since 1977 for the international side. When Billy Bingham first takes over as manager, he does go and watch George Best. I think he's playing for Hibs at the time. Clearly, the fundamental question facing Billy Bingham is, do you pick George Best or not? And in fact, around this time, obviously, when Northern Ireland qualified for the World Cup, George Best himself, he's playing football in the US at this point. There's a plan for him to go and join Middlesbrough. The idea being that he needs more competitive games to get himself ready for the World Cup. And you can see the narrative. This completes the George Best story. The one thing he has left to do is play in a World Cup. This is Northern Ireland's greatest ever player, probably. Not even probably, he is the greatest player to come from Northern Ireland. And what more fitting way to end that career than for him to appear in that World Cup? But the move to Middlesbrough doesn't happen. And when the initial squad of 45 comes out, George Best isn't on the list. And he is destined to be one of the greatest players, if not the greatest player ever, to never make it to a World Cup.
I think there might be one better, and we'll go there in a minute. But I just want to commend Billy Bingham's decision-making on this, because I think he absolutely got it right. I completely get the sentiment that you're going to want not just Northern Ireland's greatest player, but one of the world's greatest players to play on the world stage. So I can understand there would have been some kind of clamour for George Best to be taken to Spain and be part of the squad. And I think Best himself hoped that he would just be a squad player and get the odd 10, 15 minutes. Now, for somebody like George Best to be saying, I hope to go and just feature in one game for 10, 15 minutes of a World Cup finals, pretty much tells you he's not ready. He shouldn't be going to the World Cup finals, and he would be denying a place of a younger player that's the future of Northern Ireland and not the past. Best himself had his chances. As we mentioned, he only played 37 internationals, and he didn't look after himself the same way that Pat Jennings looked after himself, or another great that never went to a World Cup finals, like a Ryan Giggs, who was still playing up until 40. And, you know, if had Wales qualified for a World Cup in that period, I think Ryan Giggs would have gone. In fact, he did go to, I think, the Olympic Games. But I think it's the right decision from Billy Bingham. I think it must have been a difficult decision for him at the time because there would have been a lot of pressure. But I think it's absolutely the right decision. However, I think when you talk about greatest footballers never to go on to a World Cup, there are two distinct categories. You've got the category one, which is where George Best and Ryan Giggs fall into. World-class players are attached to a nation that doesn't necessarily and isn't expected to qualify for World Cup finals. You could look at Jari Litmanen, who we talked about before, Neville Southall, who we featured before. Fantastic players. I prefer the second category, which is great players that have never gone to a World Cup, that play for nations that generally go to the World Cup all the time. And that's a much more interesting bucket of players.
Yeah, go on.
The obvious ones, David Ginola, Eric Cantona for France, two amazing players that lit up the Premier League, never played a World Cup football match. But then you've got one of your favourites, Bernd Schuster, at his prime in the 1980s, playing at Barcelona, doesn't go to a World Cup and represent West Germany because Bernd Schuster is Bernd Schuster and he does his things his way. He corrects problems for himself.
There is a running theme, isn't there, with all these players?
And to answer your question, is George Best the greatest player never to go on to World Cup finals? In my view, it's another player that we featured on this podcast previously. And although I'm tempted to go Matt Letizia, I think the real answer would be Alfredo Di Stefano, who never went to a World Cup, played for Argentina and Spain, and through injury and other circumstances, never played at a World Cup finals for either Argentina or Spain.
Yeah, that is incredible. So George Best, he doesn't make the squad, and you're absolutely right in terms of that decision-making. I mean, I think when you look at Billy Bingham's time in charge, I think you can point to three massive calls he makes, brave decisions for lots of different reasons, and actually history looks back very fondly and very kindly about them. So you have not picking George Best, which, I mean, it's George Best. You can have George Best in the squad. Unbelievable. We sort of passed on it, but the captain is Martin O'Neill, and he appoints Martin O'Neill as captain of Northern Ireland when he takes over. And that's super significant. Martin O'Neill becomes the first Catholic to captain Northern Ireland. And, you know, when O'Neill sort of talks about it, Bingham takes I've made the decision, it all goes through me, don't worry about the flat, whatever it is. You know, and it is controversial in parts, so you can't escape the challenges of Northern Ireland and Belfast at that time. And then you got that third call, because this 45-man squad doesn't include George Best, but Billy Bingham is prepared to take a risk because it includes a 17-year-old who's made his debut 2 weeks before this 45-man squad is picked. Norman Whiteside, Jamie.
A wonderful, wonderful footballer. Yeah, 17 years old. Billy Bingham has already made his mind up before picking his 22-man squad out of the 45 you mentioned, that not only is Norman Whiteside going, that he's going to start him. He's already made that decision. And Whiteside is a fantastic player. He's got incredible skill. He's got strength. He's physical presence. But I don't know if I'm jumping ahead here with the squad there, Graham, because this brings us back to Alvin Martin Panini sticker moment, because you've already alluded to it. Terry Cochran makes the 1982 World Cup Panini sticker album, but he doesn't go to the finals because he is injured. However, he's not alone, because in the sticker album, Panini have got a player called Tommy Sloan. Do you know who Tommy Sloan is?
No, means nothing to me.
Now, Tommy Sloan is playing for Manchester United. And as you know, Graham, I may have slipped in there once or twice. I'm a Manchester United fan. I have absolutely no recollection of Tommy Slow ever. I had to do the classic Wikipedia to look him up, and he did sign, and he played a few games for Northern Ireland. My theory is, because we know that Panini sticker albums are generally put together 3 or 4 months before the World Cup final to start. So I think somebody at Panini has picked up on the idea that there's a young kid at Manchester United from Northern Ireland. Billy Bingham's going to take him. So why don't we get on board and shock everyone and have this fairly unknown player in our sticker album? How great are we going to be? It's a 1 in 2 chance. And I think Panini sticker album have bet the wrong guy.
I love it. That's got to be a good theory. Whiteside is a really interesting pick because not only does he pick him, and by the end of the World Cup, Norman Whiteside has played more international matches than he has club matches. This is totally untried 17-year-old. But not only that, is Bingham changes his formation. So he's been playing 4-4-2 or 4-2-4. He's been playing with 2 wide men. He switches to a 4-3-3. Billy Hamilton plays up top on his own with Whiteside down one side and Armstrong down the other. So there's an unbelievable show of faith in Norman Whiteside. I think the other thing about that squad, which is worth mentioning, I sort of flagged at the start of that era, you had some sort of top-level footballers in terms of the clubs they're playing for. We're talking about having the Arsenal defence there. By the time you get to the World Cup, it has changed. And that's partly changed because of 1 or 2 retirements, a couple of players out of favour. But you've also had a series of players, so Sammy McElroy was at Man United. Jimmy Nicholl were at Man United. They've both moved on. Sammy McElroy, I think, goes to Stoke. Jimmy Nicholl goes to the US football. You have Martin O'Neill. Martin O'Neill was playing for the European champions. He was playing for the league champions in Notts Forest. By this stage, he's in the 2nd division playing for Norwich City. It is just extraordinary. And when you look at across that squad, there are 6 top tier or Premier League or Div 1 it was their players. You've got 6 from Division 2, you've got 2 from Division 3, you've got 1 from Division 4, you've got 2 from the Irish League, 4 from the Irish League, 1 from John McLennan with Rangers, and 2 from the North American Soccer League in the form of Jimmy Nicholl and David McQuarrie. Now, again, if you're going to make the case for George Best, who apparently needed to be playing more than the US League, that's, there's one rule for one, I guess. But this, again, says a lot for what Billy Bingham does in terms of getting a team culture and a way of playing and having players he can trust on the pitch. He knows exactly what they're going to do. Because actually that defence of Nicholl, Donaghy, McClelland and Chris Nicholl, other than the one game that Donaghy's suspended for, they play every game. And in fact, the team is unchanged throughout the entire group games. There's only Donaghy's suspension and an injury to Pat Jennings that there are any changes in the squad for the games at all. So he's got a really tried and trusted team.
Yeah, they do have Tom Finney playing from those, so that's pretty impressive. I would point out not the Tom Finney. Tom Finney of Cambridge United. Don't they spend most of their preparation before they go to Spain in Brighton?
They're in Brighton. They have an amazing pre-warm-up camp in Brighton, where it turns out it is ridiculously hot. And again, this is credited as a fantastic thing for team bonding, and actually it hits the spot sort of perfectly for them. Now, we'll sort of come on to this. In amongst this, there was a long running, as quite often, because there was a dispute over pay deal. Now, the players thought they'd been promised something, and the FA, whether they reneged on it but they get to the point, and basically the Irish FA cut a deal where they won't pay a massive amount for the first round, but they pay a really large chunk if they get through for any second round games, because I don't think they're going to get through. They think they're going to get through to it, which there's further evidence that suggests they didn't necessarily think that Northern Ireland would make it to the second round when the Irish players are celebrating after their result against Spain, which gets them through to the next phase of qualification. About halfway through the night, they discover they are all booked on return flights. And it gets even better. The Irish FA also have to arrange to bring out the green kit because they'd only brought the white kit that they used in the first round. So I'm not sure they had much faith that Northern Ireland were going to get any further through this. But you're absolutely right. That Brighton holiday camp, or whatever it was, has a big effect on them. They actually turn out very well paired. So that is one of the features of this World Cup. It is extraordinarily hot. They play as it was in Brighton, apparently.
It's Spain in June and July. It's always hot. It's not a surprise. It's not like it's unseasonal weather.
This is true. They should have been ready for it. It's quite interesting, actually, reading So one of the things they had to do is that when they were in Spain, it was so hot they had to kind of restrict the sunbathing times for the players because they would burn. And there's not a great deal else to do, and especially by the time they end up in the second round, they're basically staying at this airport hotel. There's literally nothing else to do. I think the only thing to do is to look at the airport from it. And what you could do is sunbathe, but of course they're not. They're being restricted on the amount of hours they can go out there because they don't want them to get sunstroke and whatever for the games. It is quite something interesting. That camp works quite well for them. So that group begins. Spain play Honduras. Honduras, the surprise package. Honduras do very well in that game, and it takes a slightly contentious penalty for Spain to get over the line in that game. When Northern Ireland play Yugoslavia, actually the result is a good one for Northern Ireland. They start the campaign well, so it's 0-0. They actually get better and stronger as the game goes on, and you could see actually the training regime that Billy Bingham put them through. He put them in good, and I think they would have gone into that game. They'd have been happy with the draw beforehand. I think the route to victory, to qualification, was draw against Yugoslavia, beat Honduras, and draw against Spain. And they'd have been happy with the draw with Yugoslavia, but actually, the way they finished, they probably thought they might have been able to nick that. So if Northern Ireland were happy with the draw against Yugoslavia, they're less so with the draw against Honduras. Now, Honduras are a real unknown quantity, but in fact, they do really well during this World Cup. And Northern Ireland take the lead in that game. Jerry Armstrong gets go on. Having gone ahead, they think that should probably, you might think they get over the line, but Honduras gets stronger. And, that game finishes 1-1. Ireland have begun with 2 draws. Spain have got 4 points, Yugoslavia 1 point. And it feels as though that was the missed opportunity, mostly because they know the last game coming up is Spain, host nation, and Spain are a good side. And so I think there's probably a feeling that their race might be run, not necessarily within the camp, but maybe from outside that. And certainly pundits would be giving them little or no hope of getting the result.
Yeah, and prior to that, and we must remember, and this is very significant actually in this World Cup, as we'll find out a little bit more, and as we found out previously, the Yugoslavia-Honduras game has already taken place, and Yugoslavia have won with a late penalty, 1-0, which gives Yugoslavia 3 points. So going into the Spain-Northern Ireland game, if Northern Ireland were to win unexpectedly 1-0, that would be a result that would take both Spain and Northern Ireland through to the next round. Now, this football match happens just hours after the disgrace of Gijón, where West Germany and Austria played out a convenient result that allowed both teams to go through and Algeria to go out. What are the chances that collusion could happen in the same tournament on the same day? It's not going to happen, is it really? It's once in a lifetime.
It does seem bizarre. I'm not sure I think the reaction of the Spanish crowd to Spain's performance, I don't think that they would have settled for a defeat on that. And Spain think that. I think losing to Northern Ireland hasn't even entered into their mindset. Now, if Northern Ireland had reason to be, I think this was a tough task already. Spain have got a couple of quite generous penalty calls in the first 2 games that have helped get them over the line. The choice of Paraguayan referee Hector Ortiz, I should say Spanish speaking, Hector Ortiz, seen as perhaps not, whether deliberately or otherwise, not necessarily an ideal choice in terms of neutrality in this game as Spain Northern Ireland. And bear in mind as well, an undercurrent to all of this, and we talked about this on the England 82 episode. Things. This is off the backdrop of the Falklands War. Very possible. It was very possible, of course, the Northern Ireland, as well as England, and Scotland wouldn't have been allowed to take part in this World Cup because of the potential fears of a boycott and the challenge of playing Argentina. And feelings would be running high. And you have a Latin American referee, and you have Spain, who would have, sort of close Latin links. Everything's sort of set up for, this them v us kind of siege mentality. And I've read several accounts from various players. They're all pretty clear. Spain employed some pretty industrial tackles. They were pretty robust. It was not quite the sister performance to the Holland v Spain World Cup final from a few years ago, but the tackling was pretty robust. Billy Hamilton, who played most of his football in the lower leagues as a target man, he just said he'd never had tackles like it in that game. But with the added mix being that you had the tackles, but they were actually all quite good players at the same time.
Yep. Before Spain became wonderful footballers through the tiki-taki era, this is how I remember Spain. I remember Spain always being physical and very aggressive. Back in the 80s, Spain were rough, but maybe in this particular game, they were a little rough. And they probably could get away with it because maybe there was some kind of collusion with the referee. We don't know. We just suspect these things.
He certainly seemed reluctant to book any Spain players for any of the treatment that's dished out. So Northern Ireland get through to the break actually at 0-0. They're a bit battered and bruised. It's worth saying, obviously a Northern Ireland win would get Northern Ireland through. Northern Ireland would also go through with a high-scoring draw. So anything above 2-2, 3-3, 4-4 would get them through. A 1-1 draw, and it would be lots. They would be drawing lots between Yugoslavia and Northern Ireland, which is incredible. But that was a very real possibility in this game. But what's clear is that, Northern Ireland put in a pretty heroic defensive job, but they have to score, and scoring goals has not been easy for this team, not just at the World Cup. They're really able to shut teams out, but they do struggle to score goals. And so that appears to be the big challenge for them. Unbelievably, within 2 minutes of the restart, there's some, when you watch that goal back and you look at the position, I mean, Jerry Armstrong is essentially playing, he is the right winger, but he's almost playing as another right back, an auxiliary right back, really. But he does, as a result, he picks the ball up in his own half to start the move. We runs, 30 yards or so through. Lays the ball out to Billy Hamilton. Billy Hamilton, a player I've watched many, many times, getting on the end of crosses. I've absolutely no idea why he's dancing down the ring. Knocks the ball down the line, whips in across. Hamilton himself says, he was just trying to put it in the danger area. One of the things about Spain and that 1982 side is England had, possibly the greatest goalkeeper in the world at that time, Peter Shilton. Northern Ireland could probably lay claim to that for Pat Jennings. But Louis Arconada, Spain's number one, was sort of thought to be the best goalkeeper in the world at that time, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was a fantastic goalkeeper. Played for Spain for a number of years leading into the World Cup. He really was Spain's number one, and was generally seen as a man that you could trust, a safe pair of hands.
Except on this occasion where he memorably palms the ball out gloriously to the steps of direction of Jerry Armstrong, who whacks it in. And Northern Ireland, 2 minutes into the second half, are 1-0 up in Valencia. Huge noise against, and they talk about Armstrong again, a couple of the other players, they all talk about the utter silence when the ball goes in. There's they're kind of wondering what's happened because there's just no noise at all. It's not like England hitting a 4 in a test match in India. It's kind of, hang on a minute, what's happened there? It's just all totally quiet. So, against all odds, they now have a whole half to defend. They concede 1 goal and it's lots. If they concede 2 goals, then that is their lot. It's, so that's really a difficult thing. But it is the one thing Northern Ireland are very good at doing is defending. They put men behind the ball. They They defend for their life in that game. Now, it's made harder for them. They did think that that the referee might... Referees having in Spain slightly generous penalties in the previous 2 games. They're always a bit wary of that. He doesn't give a penalty, but he does send Maldonaghy off for... I mean, he puts his arm up, but it's nothing really, is it?
No, it really isn't. It's bizarre. Even Maldonaghy looks confused, accepting the decision, but it really is. Considering what's gone on physically in that game,
Yes,
Maldonaghy's...
no, you're right. You're right.
Flash of an arm is one of the least aggressive challenges on the pitch, and gets an instant red card.
Yeah, I'd forgotten in the context of that game when you'd seen everything else that was, out of all things, worthy of the red.
It must have been the breaking point for him. The referee, the Paraguayan referee, was like, "I've had enough of this. My patience is worn thin."
They're left now with half an hour and 10 men to survive. But to their credit, not only does sort of Northern Ireland defend it, they actually defend it with relatively few alarms. It's obviously nervy. The opposition have a lot of Spain have a lot of the ball, but there aren't. I mean, there's a bit of a horror show. One nearly bounces over Pat Jennings at the end.
I have to say, I mean, this is real kind of childish humour from my perspective. One of the things I remember about this game, probably one of the main things actually, watching it with my dad, and we wanted Northern Ireland to win, and we were thrilled when they were up. We just couldn't help ourselves because Spain had a forward in their team, and he'd scored a penalty, one of the dubious penalties early on in the team, and his name was Roberto Ufati. And every time, I think it was John Watson or Barry Davis would say the name Ufati, my dad and I would just laugh and snigger. This fart humour coming from BBC's match of the day commentators was just too glorious not to laugh at. I mean, obviously it's English humour and it only really works in the English language. But a player called Ufati, if you can't laugh at that, then nothing's really going to get you up.
Something's wrong. So Northern Ireland hang on. They secure an unbelievable 1-0 victory, and they are through to the next round. None of the arrangements, as I say, none of the arrangements are in place. They have to rush to find a hotel to get a new kit sent out so they can play in green. As we discussed before, it's a funny arrangement where for this next round they went into a round of 3, which the top team goes through to the semi-final, and so for this, the other thing they'd done is they hadn't finalised which game would be played second and which game would be played third. So it meant that the winner of the first game gets the longer break. So France beat Austria in the first game, and they get the longer break. Austria have to play Northern Ireland 3-4 days afterwards. That Northern Ireland side, that's the only time they make a change to the side. Pat Jennings is injured. Pat Jennings, actually, it has to be said, was, in the lead up to that tournament, I mean, he basically barely plays for Arsenal for a year or so. He has a groin injury, which he just can't sort of get rid of. And Jim Platt, the Middlesbrough keeper, has done very well there. And there are some arguments that Jim Platt should be starting. I mean, history suggests that, again, the choice of Pat Jennings as your number one probably was the correct one. But Jim Platt does come in to play that first game against Austria, and Sammy Nelson comes in to replace Maldonaghy, who's suspended, of course. And the game against Austria begins pretty well. Actually, Northern Ireland start well. Austria look as though it was the Austria of the Austria-Germany game that began with that one. They definitely look a bit sleepy, and Billy Hamilton puts Northern Ireland ahead. Austria come out second half, totally change side, and actually go 2-1 up. And they do come back in that game. Billy Hamilton gets second and get an equaliser, and it's a 2-2 draw against Austria. Now that means Austria are out, and it means Northern Ireland have one chance, and they have to somehow beat France. Now again, you would say, I think they're a bit flat at the end of this one. What's harder than beating the home nation Spain? Well, it's probably beating Michel Platini, Alain Giresse, and Jean Tigana. That's a decent French side. And so they know it's an uphill struggle going into that last game. Pat Jennings does come back. They are able to go back to their preferred side. Though they lose that game 4-1 pretty comfortably in the end, Northern Ireland actually do find the back of the net first. And not only do they find it, it's a really, really good goal. It was a impressive little back heel from Northern Whiteside, and Martin O'Neill does this lovely little 1-2 burst through, finishes really nicely. He's about 10 yards onside. It's I have no idea why the flag's gone up. And the goal was ruled out. 2 minutes later, France score. Once France score, that is it. And I think what's interesting is I've read a few interviews with Martin O'Neill, and I mean he's still really, really bitter about that goal being disallowed, and that's because he scores this really good goal in a World Cup finals. And you probably take with a pinch of salt as to whether they would have been able to shut out Michel Platini and co as they had Spain. But obviously, getting ahead is that is the model. It's get ahead and defend the lead.
Yeah,
and you do that. It is the best goal they scored in the entire World Cup. It's a really, really good goal. And it's been taken away from you. Martin O'Neill, he's still, I think, rightly quite bitter about that. I'm
literally just watching the goal now. Yeah, it really does look to be a clear error.
There were at least 2 players keeping him on. Yeah, and it's a really sweet goal. It's a really good goal. So Northern Ireland go on to lose that game 4-1. France, they themselves fall foul of Johann Schumacher in the semi-final with Germany, and Italy go on to win the tournament. And I kid you not, this may be the third 1982 World Cup team we've done on this, but we've still got Italy, and we still got that France team, and we still got that Brazil team to do. We'll be going back.
Yeah, this is the World Cup that keeps giving.
We should say, of course, so Billy Bingham stays in charge for the next 4 years, and unbelievably, Northern Ireland qualify for the 1986 World Cup. That goes on to be Pat Jennings' last year. He actually retires from club football at the end of 1985 and just plays reserve football for Spurs just to keep his hand in to play at the World Cup. It's just an extraordinary thing. So Billy Bingham underlines the legacy of Northern Ireland at World Cups, which is what it comes to be known for. But the success continues. So the home internationals, which we talked about, the writing was further on the wall. In 1982, they moved away from holding all the games in a sort of 2-week window at the end of the season and started to hold them in friendly windows across the season. That feels like, that bit where they moved Top of the Pops to a Saturday afternoon and made it a half-hour show and got rid of the street DJs and got some, it's the kind of the last rites of that tournament. And so they get to 1984, which is to be the last home internationals ever.
Yeah, it is. It's run its course. It doesn't have the relevance in the world it once had. The World Cup and the Euros has superseded as the signature international football tournaments, and that's where the home international team should be aspiring to be. And having seen England, Scotland and Northern Ireland qualify for the 82 World Cup, there's cause for optimism that British teams are going to be competing at World Cups going forward and at European Championships. But I think also the British home internationals have always had bits of controversies. You've got the troubles that have gone on, as they're called, in Northern Ireland, which has led to the 80-81 tournament not being complete. You can go back to 77 and the second of 2 or 3 pitch invasions from the Scots at Wembley, where they take down the goalposts. They did that in 1967 as well, I think, when they became unofficial world champions. So it's a tournament that had its glory, but it's now consigned to the past. And I think we debated once before that would it be a good idea to bring back? And I think I was of the position, yeah, it would be. But I think you convinced me quite easily that would be a bad idea. And now, having reflected on it, is a bad idea. But Northern Ireland win the final one, and they win it in the best style that any football team can win a league. Because in a 14 tournament, they finished top on 3 points, ahead of second place Wales on 3 points, ahead of third place England on 3 points, ahead of fourth place bottom Scotland on 3 points. They win it by a goal difference of +1. It's probably the best way you can win something, isn't it? Against all of their rivals. But more significantly, and beyond the home internationals, Billy Bingham is doing a great job, and he is really putting Northern Ireland on the map because they come incredibly close to qualifying for the Euros in 1984. Now, this is a time when only 8 teams qualified for the final tournament, and they were in a group with West Germany, amongst other teams, and they finished level on points with West Germany. Now, surprisingly, they didn't have the biggest goal difference, as we've established. Billy Bingham would nick games by the odd goal, 1-0 generally, and Germany had been able to win games by a bigger margin. So Northern Ireland have finished second in this group. West Germany themselves goals of the Euros. Obviously, West Germany through the 80s, West Germany through any decade generally competed in the latter stages. So I think this whole period from 1983 through to the World Cup in 1986 is the glory period for Northern Irish football, and it's a period of time where you think Northern Ireland are going to qualify for every World Cup going.
We should start to think. Well, not start to think. We should now think about how we rank this side. As a reminder, 5 categories of greatness, all-time greats at the top. True greats, followed by our middle category, touch greatness, edge of greatness, and blink of greats at the bottom. Jeremy, where are you going with this side? You're not going to be troubling us with true greats, are you?
Well, I'll tell you where I'm going with this one. As you've done most of the hard work on this, reading the brilliant, as you told me, Evan Marshall's Field of Wonders book, I'm going to hand the baton back to you and ask you first off. Graham,
I like it.
Where are you going with this Northern Irish thing?
Well, yes, where do I go with that? I think ultimately it has to be edge of greatness, doesn't it? You know, what I think about this side, when you think about what they achieve, is unbelievable. But this Northern Ireland side, out of that squad, would any of them get into the England team? Would any of them get into the Scotland team? Oh, I don't know, Scotland team maybe. Now, obviously, Pat Jennings should get into the England. That's the only position. They got Peter Shilton and Ray Clements. It's the only position that's already filled. Norman Whiteside goes on to achieve stuff. Martin O'Neill is a fantastic player. But I think when I look at the makeup of this squad, there are a number of journeyman players in there. And the commitment and the way, the teamwork and the bonding that he does, the job Billy Bingham does on that is just incredible, the way they get to work. And they're such a hard-working team. Ultimately, I would love to go more than edge of greatness, but I just don't think you can do it.
Yeah, I don't think they're all-time greats. I think we can rule that one out. And I think we would be pretty unfair if we wanted to kind of stick them in the blinkered greats category. So it leaves us with 3 brackets in terms of whether I fix them. I think there is an argument they are true greats. I think we've put England in the edge of greatness, and Northern Ireland got to the same stage, but they are a country of 1.4 million people at this particular moment. One of the smallest countries to ever qualify for a World Cup finals. Iceland have been there with 330,000. But then after that, Northern Ireland are, I think, second or third behind Trinidad and Tobago and possibly Paraguay, which we dispute. For a country of such small populations, they do and have punched above their weight. Not in the weight that Uruguay have. Uruguay is a nation of around about 3 million people, and what they've done in international football is absolutely phenomenal. But Northern Ireland do punch above their weight. And Billy Bingham has set up a period where he's assembled these players that play in a particular style, that does put defence first. He's got them to a World Cup finals. He's come within a couple of goals in goal difference of taking them to a Euros. He's taken them to their second World Cup finals where they get the opportunity to play Brazil. He's given the nation the opportunity to sing their own World Cup anthem. He's given the nation the opportunity to collect their own Yaman Panini stickers in a World Cup. There's nothing more exciting than that, than seeing your home nation peeled back in those shiny cards. So true greats is definitely an option, but I agree with you. I do think this is a edge of great story with tinges of true greatness and tinges of touches of greatness.
Yeah, I think you definitely say Jerry Armstrong's moment is true greats, but Northern Ireland's edge of greatness. So there we go. Thank you for that, Jamie. We have been talking about Martin O'Neill, and we will be talking about Martin O'Neill again So one of the podcasts here coming up in the coming weeks is going to be Martin O'Neill's Celtic, which is a fantastic story. We have an FA Cup final special. We're going to be going back into the 80s. We're going to centre it around Coventry City of 87, but it's really about the glories of watching Cup Final Grandstand or Cup Final World of Sport.
St. Negreezy.
St. Negreezy, yes, it was. And we're going to do something special around the Euros, and we're going to be delving into Euro 96, which is a really special one for us. So that's what you have to look forward to. If you have enjoyed this podcast or want to check out any of the ones we've done previously, you can catch us at our website, it's greatesteam.co. So thank you, Jamie.
You're very welcome. Very enjoyable.
And we will speak again soon.